All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm very excited for today's conversation. As I've shared on social media and in a few locations, I've got the opportunity to have a conversation with Steve Chandler today. Steve has been absolutely influential, in his the books that he's created in the world, but also from some of his audios and from the online coaching school that he's created. I've had the opportunity to really just immerse myself in this work over the last 4 years, and although Steve might not know this, it's really been impactful in my growth. And I was thinking about it this morning that there's all these little things in how I've developed both myself as a coach, but also developed my coaching business where I'm like, oh, like that came from Steve. That came from one of the lessons that I've learned from Steve. So, Steve, thank you for taking the time to join me today. And anything that you want to just share as we get started about yourself, maybe just give the listeners, a bit of a perspective as to who you are.
Sure. Well, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate you inviting me on. Well, I did many careers. I had many failures before I got into coaching and writing books. I didn't, never thought I could write a book. The idea of me being in a streaming program like yours, my family members would have laughed themselves to death. Uh, and so I had bankruptcy and alcoholism, divorce, and those were the good points. Those were on my resume. Many other terrible things going on in my life, and fortunately, I went through a 12-step recovery program with a sponsor, which was like coaching. It wasn't called coaching. In fact, when I went through it, there wasn't such a Andrew, and we know back then your options were psychotherapy, or good luck, or there just wasn't something like a life coach or a business coach. There were business consultants in certain specialties, but they certainly weren't coaches. And all the coaches in those days were in sports or the arts, music, acting. Nobody even had a dream of average people, regular people like me getting a coach. So anyway, that turned my life around, having a sponsor in a recovery program. And so I started my life all over again and went through various careers and ended up inside a corporate training company where they got so much business that I became one of the presenters um, and started doing that. And then after I began presenting, doing training and seminars, the company started asking, well, can you coach? Can you stay over a day and coach some of our individuals? And uh, I, I, I wanted to say no because I didn't know how to coach. I never coached anybody, but I was in debt. I had a lot of debt. I was trying to pay off my debts. And when they said, we'll pay you the same amount we paid you for the seminar if you stay over. And I said, oh yeah, coaching, no problem. So I just faked it. I just sat across the table and talked to people. And after a while, I got my own coach, Steve Hardison, who's powerful coach. And most coaches today have read his book, the book about him, called The Ultimate Coach, which I recommend. It's an amazing book. But his coaching completely turned my life around. My my debts went away. I got prosperity. I got just everything changed. My attitude toward life, my happiness. I got married after being coached by him. I've got a great marriage, and everything changed. And I was so impacted by what powerful coaching could do to a human being in every level of their life, and that the changes were long lasting. They weren't like therapy. I'd done some therapy where in the therapy you had to keep going back because new things to cope with were coming up. I'm like, oh, I got to go process my feelings about all this. And it was never ending. But coaching was different. And the internal shifts, the breakthroughs, the insights, the change of how you do life was so powerful and permanent. It altered what you might call my personality or who I was being in the world was completely different. Much happier, much more relaxed, and really enjoying life like I didn't think was possible as a grown up. I thought grown ups had to suffer. So that's my story.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Really just giving that the snapshot of the journey. And so, one of the things that I'm curious about, I hear the shifts that occurred through coaching that, were really life changing. And like, what was the process that you went through from, those initial coaching conversations that you had in the boardroom, sort of just like stepping into the space to actually really, being at I would call like the forefront of the coaching industry and really, establishing um, the idea of creating like a prosperous coaching business from a place of service. I know that's a lot of like a lot that I kind of put in there, but like, can you share more about like that process, that timeline that led you into the creation of the ACS?
Right. Yeah. My problem, once I started doing coaching, was I hated selling. I hated all aspects of selling and marketing and selling and promoting yourself. I really didn't like that, and I didn't do it well. And so I worked with my coach on that, and he said, "I'm going to show you what I do, and it's called selling without selling." And he said, um, "It's a kind of system or philosophy in which you begin delivering the service that is on offer right away to a prospective buyer of that service. And you don't sell, you don't persuade, you don't try to close them, you don't try to talk them into coaching. You actually say, sit down, let's see whether it's a fit for you. Let's try it out. And I said, wow, that would be great. I could skip the selling part and do the part I do enjoy doing, which is the actual coaching. So I would invite people into coaching conversations and just conversations, and they'd have problems, and my coach would guide me. So every time I had a potential client, I would take it into my coaching session and say, okay, here's what he is saying, here's what I'm saying. They're kind of on the fence. I've had 1.5 conversations, and he would say, okay. And he would role play. He'd say, you be them and I'll be you. And here's your next conversation. And so he shared with me how he creates clients by creating the relationship first, and the work comes shortly after that. So that's how I learned. And because I was so bad and so averse to selling, I had to learn the ACS method, we now call it, the hard way. And by learning something the hard way, it's once you learn it, it becomes something that's fun to teach because it can really help other people. And I found out, oh, I'm not alone here. most of the people I meet who are coaches, they love helping other people. They love making a difference. They love learning about psychology, philosophy, how people change, but they hate selling and they postpone it. They procrastinate and they make half-hearted efforts at selling, and they're awkward and their fees are too low, and it's a mess. And I began to see this with coaches I met. So many years ago, I said, look, I got a system here. And I coached a couple of people individually, and their practices rose up real fast. And I went to my coach and I said, I bet if I had 8 or 9 people in a room, I could teach them all at once. And he said, yeah, let's go do it. And so I had my first coaching school, I guess 16 years ago. And we had 9 coaches sitting around a table, and I just simply worked with them on this method of serving before you sell, connecting with people, create the relationship first, and the sale will occur. And they had success. So I did it again with 9, and then did it again with 9. And over time, there were more people hearing about it. And so finally okay, I'll do 20, and then, okay, I'll do 30, and I'll do 50. And that's how it grew. And then I got to where I got old. I didn't expect that to happen. And travel was harder for me. And I thought, I wonder if I could put this online. So it's open to the whole world. And I don't have to fit 100 people in a room or 200 people in a room. And so that's how it happened. That's the evolution of what we call the ACS method.
Yeah, there's so many great concepts that have come out of the ACS. I'll call it the ACS. And one of the ones that I actually see quite often out in the world is this concept of selling the experience and not the concept of coaching. And it's even for myself, it's been interesting because I have come from the other side of it, where I have sold the concept of coaching, and the concept of what a signing up for a coaching experience could look like. And yes, there has been there's been people that have signed on from that way of conducting things, but there is something truly powerful about being like sharing the experience of coaching with somebody even before they've paid you $1. Just actually creating that container with somebody. And again, it's so great to see that mentality is really enmeshing itself in the coaching world more and more. Like, people are seeing an opportunity to slow down, an opportunity to create relationship, and understand that business can be created through that place of service.
Yeah, not only can it be, but it's more effective than sales promotion. And there's a reason for that, Andrew, that I figured out over the years. Coaching is not like other services where you know ahead of time what it is. So if somebody mows lawns, takes care of lawns, you know what that is. So they can say, hey, I mow lawns. Here's what I charge. Here's what my customers say about me. And you say, hey, it sounds great. I'll pay you. Coaching is a much more intimate, complex service, and you don't really know what it is. Every coach coaches differently. Every coaching experience is different. My clients, one client would tell you I coach a certain way, and another client would say, well, that's not how he coaches me. So even among one coach's list of clients, the coaching experience is something you can't know ahead of time what it's going to be like. So it's very hard to have people pay a significant amount of money on a leap of faith, even if they have good referrals, good testimonials. A leap of faith, I don't know what this is going to be like. Now, I can pay a lot of money for a fancy health club, and they walk me through, show me the machines and the pool and the basketball court and the pickleball court, and I know what it is. I say, okay, here's my money. It's a lot of money, but this place is great. But if I walk up to somebody and say, I'm a coach, I charge this, do you want it? I have a lot of people like my coaching. They have no idea what it is. They don't have the slightest clue what that experience is going to be, or whether it's going to have a positive effect or not. They don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. That leap of faith concept is one that's really stayed with me. I just, again, I think it can also be, it can be a bit of a trap sometimes as a coach where, if all the person has experienced is, we'll call it possibility, or what the vision can be of what they're creating, that in itself, that's a big leap of faith. And so
Yes.
giving them that experience, a few conversations to get the experience of coaching, to go out and be able to apply that in their lives, it brings more concreteness to it, brings them into a sense of reality, and that, hey, I actually can experience this now, on this pathway of creation.
That's it. That's right.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so a couple questions that just come to mind, from my own journey as well. When you talk about connection, and one of the things that you just spoke to is that, yeah, you would go out and connect with people, one conversation at a time. What would you share with somebody who felt like, hey, I don't really have a network, or I don't really feel like I'm connected to people that want coaching? What would you share with that person, in to support them in starting to expand how they're seeing connection?
Well, you don't need a huge network at the beginning. And my coach, Steve Hardison, who is a kind of a legend in the world of coaching and has made literally makes millions of dollars. He's a seven-figure coach every year. He's made millions upon millions of dollars coaching. But when he started, I knew him before he was a coach with private coaching. He was inside a company. I was inside. That's where I met him. He said when he went out to become a coach, he said, all I need is one person. All I need is one client. And I will serve that person to such a degree that will that experience will create referrals, create other people who are impacted by the work I've done with this one person, and will ask about me and say, what did you do? How did you do it? And would you do it with me, or would you do it with people in my company? So he did that. That's how he started. He had one person named Gary, and Gary had a company that was failing. He had a construction company, and he was in debt. He didn't have money to pay Hardison. Hardison said, well, find it. Go out and find it. And when you find it, bring it to me and I'll coach you. And finding the money will be the first stage of your turnaround. So this guy went out and found a way to find the money. It was $150,000. And he paid it to Hardison, and they worked together for a year. And Hardison worked so hard coaching this one person that all kinds of people felt the effect, the ripple effect, and also the direct effect. This person's business associates, this person's customers, this person's family members. They all wanted it. So it does. A lot of times, new coaches think, I need a big network. I need people who already want coaching. No, find one person, however you find them, and you know people. And if you want to find somebody, you will. And work with that person. And coaches who reach a high level of prosperity don't have to go out and find new clients anymore, because the referrals and the renewals fill their practice. There's only one person, there's only a certain amount of hours in a week I can coach. And when you get a fair amount of renewals, you've already got clients for those coaching. And then you start getting referrals, you're set.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Um, and one of the things that definitely shows up for me is that I will often, be in a place of service. I wouldn't say it's like a complete way of life, at this point, but I'm moving towards it. But there are times where I may fall into like survival patterns, or maybe ego comes in, or there's like, oh, I need money, that type of thing. What are some ways that you would bring yourself back into a place of service, or just sort of recalibrate yourself for that big picture?
Yeah, and that is, if you're not uncomfortable with the word, that's a spiritual question. And by spiritual, I mean anything from a religion that you're in to simply really embracing positive psychology, for example. Anything that allows the brain to get better at changing for the better. The brain and the heart and the system keep changing for the better. Positive psychology, three principles, Byron Katie. There are what I call vertical paths for the coach. The health of the healer, the mental health of the healer is really important. So it's not all ego and money and the horizontal. I need to achieve things. The vertical path is spiritual, and over time you learn a different relationship with your thoughts and your beliefs. So that if I have a needy, urgent, worried, pessimistic thought like, oh, I need money, I'm not making enough money, this will never work for me, you're advanced enough spiritually or psychologically to know those are only thoughts. They're not the truth. And I can let those thoughts pass through and, like you say, recalibrate and fall back into a more relaxed, peaceful state, the big picture state, and see thoughts for what they are. They're fleeting trial balloons. Most of them are untrue. They come from all over the place. They don't serve me. So why do I automatically believe them when they're negative? And the Byron Katie work is wonderful for this. Both my coach and I went to the Byron Katie 9-day school and read all of her books, and I still watch her videos all the time. And the more you get into that, or three principles, or positive psychology, about, you and I were talking earlier about optimism, learned optimism, the nervousness and the victim mentality, and how can I help other people if I'm victim to that? So I got to work on myself. It's the only profession I know where your own growth in that direction is required for it to be successful. You can be a lawyer with a terrible personality, but if you can win cases, or you can be a brain surgeon with a terrible personality and mental issues. But if you're good at brain surgery, you have a successful career. You can be a politician with horrific ego issues. In fact, these days it's required. It's a part of the job description, and and you can still achieve in that profession. In coaching, you can't. Coaches who have ego issues and try to manipulate other people and try to get before they give, have personality difficulties, narcissistic tendencies, or anything like that, the coaching profession does not go smoothly. How do you help other people when you've got those issues yourself? I used to make fun of the idea of a person being an unsuccessful success coach, and that was me for a while. I'd pull up in a beat up old car with all my debts and phone calls from the IRS and everything, and put those all my notices. We're going to take your house, throw them in the back seat, and try to sell myself as a success coach. I can help you succeed at anything, and then inside there'd be a voice saying, "Well, why don't you use it on yourself first?" So yeah, it's really important to learn to not take anything personally. That's job one of the four agreements in that great book, The Four Agreements. Don't take anything personally. So someone says no to an invitation to work with you. Don't create a story that means I'm not worth it, I'm not worthy, I'm not worth spending time with, people don't like me, people don't value me. Coaches can't afford to have that kind of patterned catastrophe thinking and still build a coaching practice. They have to, that has to be addressed along the way.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And for the folks that are watching, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask us, please feel free to put it in the chat as well. Um, you made me laugh there, Steve, because there's a part of me that, when you spoke about like the unsuccessful success coach, it made me think to like the concept of the lamppost, that even in that moment, the Steve Chandler of that moment had probably so many gifts to give, to the people that you were in conversation with. And yes, of course, there is that element of, are you practicing what you preach? Are you, on the path of creating the life that you're supporting others to create? And it, again, it also just kind of makes me think about, and there's so many people out in the world that just need somebody to listen to them. They need somebody to
Yes.
hear them.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point you made. You don't have to be wildly successful to teach other people and coach other people, but you have to be on the path. You have to have integrity. You can't overpromise. You have to. The promise of the coaching isn't "I'll get you the result." I've never told anybody, "Yeah, work with me. I'll help you double your income. You will double your income if you work with me." Even implying that creates imposter syndrome in the coach. And what I would only promise, I'll give you the best coaching I know how to give. And I could also say factually, and I have had clients who have had success in these arenas in our work together. And I can tell you that's true. And I can also tell you I'll give you the best coaching I know how in your desire to reach this goal. You say is your goal. I'll work with you and we'll have, that's now a mutual goal. But me guaranteeing you'll hit that? No, I don't. That's because that's up to the client.
Absolutely. Um, I want to shift a little bit to, some of these inner, we could call them qualities, or just like the, yeah, just that the sort of the inner focus, the creation of, you know, the development of self that you've gone through, the journey that you've gone through with that. And the first place, a bit of a question out of left field, but given that I do a lot of work with men, and supporting men on their journey of masculinity and that authentic development, like, what have you noticed over the years in terms of just that masculine journey that you've been on? Or like what stood out to you, in terms of like what you've seen, or where you see sort of the masculine journey going?
Well, some people, because our culture is changing so rapidly, that a lot of times that masculine culture is demonized in the that masculine quality, or is demonized and made wrong, and so people try to overcorrect and and be some kind of passive new age soft speaking guru, when the masculine element inside of them wants to be authentic and present. And so I think there's no everybody has masculine and feminine elements inside their system. No reason to give up the masculine in trying to please everybody. It can be very healthy, it can be loving, it can be compassionate, it can have qualities of strength and leadership that are powerful and useful to other people, serve other people. No reason to give that up. Stay strong with it if you're inclined in that direction, but don't shut out the Me Too movement and other areas of sensitivity that are arising in the culture. Allow yourself to understand that, embrace that, and not give up who you are and who you want to be.
Yeah, and it's um there's from the elements of the masculine and feminine to, kind of what you're talking about with the spiritual element before. um what has that journey been like for you? I know you've talked about the difference between, creating life on the soul line versus the goal line, and having them sort of come into like synchronicity together. I'm curious as like to how that journey's been for you.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. That that soul line journey is everything. Not everything, almost it's the most neglected. Let's overcorrect and call it everything. If I call it everything, people who neglect it might move in that direction. Uh, that's been the biggest breakthrough for me over time, and I've learned a lot along the way in that arena. My recovery program from alcohol and drugs was a spiritual program where the false spirit, the addiction to drugs and alcohol, which gives you temporary illusion of spiritual high or a spiritual connection to the universe, but it's so temporary, and so it has such a kickback, such a bad downside that it ruins lives. And so the recovery program I went through, the goal was, and the process that works is, let's take false spirit and replace it with true spirit. And it doesn't have to be carry the language of supernatural beings that I pray to. It doesn't have to be that. It can be a gentle it can be all about the neuroscience of consciousness and expanded consciousness through meditation and spiritual readings, and like I said earlier, it can process its way through the three principles. It's a spiritual psychology inside of the three principles that allow someone to take a real spiritual journey without all baggage and memories of certain religious encounters they had when they were younger that they don't like or they don't think work. So that part, that element, that soul line where you get a spiritual dimension to your life, an ability to have and maintain inner peace no matter what's going on, and not get hooked, not velcro to every thought that shows up, not get hooked, and not believe that situations cause feelings. And that's the key thing. That's the key part, I think, of the spiritual journey, is to understand thought, understand my feelings come from the thoughts I believe, and that I don't have to believe any thought. And over time, we've been so heavily conditioned to believe every thought that shows up and to cling to every label anyone ever gave us or that we gave ourselves, and to carry that belief forward in a limiting way. We've been taught that. We've been conditioned. So it's an unlearning that allows you to rise on the soul line and not be bothered by what happens. The only thing that can bother me is my thought about what happens. So that's the key. That's the importance, I think, of having a active spiritual journey that actually works, that has a function. I hear people say, "Oh, I lost my faith." No, you didn't have function. If it were functioning, if it were working for you, you wouldn't lose it. If I learn how to drive a car and I can now drive a car without thinking about it, that's function. It's not faith in my car. And the same is true with a spiritual path. Find something that when it's practiced actually works and shows up in real life, shows up in when someone says something hurtful or demoralizing or unfair, that you're not affected by it. You're not hooked by it, triggered. Favorite word of many people who think they're spiritual, they also walk around talking about the things that trigger them. Well, you're not. Your spirituality is just intellectual. It doesn't function.
And when did you feel like there was sort of that shift from, potentially the goal line, the achievement, whatever that may have looked like for you, into more of that being of connected to soul and spirit? Where at what point of your life did you find that sort of shifting for you?
That's been 1,000 shifts. The first shift, so it's like living in a basement of total darkness, not knowing there are windows, and all of a sudden, when I went through spiritual recovery program, one window gets opened, and light comes in, a little bit of light, but I'm not living in darkness anymore. And then I find out other things. I learn other things from University of Santa Monica. There's a beautiful book that the two people who founded that university for spiritual psychology called Remembering the Light Within. And I got involved with the University of Santa Monica. I got to know their founders. I ended up teaching there. And If you read that book, you get their whole program. And so another window is opened. And their central teaching is around what they call I'm upset because. If you or your client or your teenage daughter is saying, I'm upset because, and you're not following that sentence fragment with what I make up about or what I about the story I create around or how I label or what I think about, if you're following it with a circumstance or another person's behavior, you don't get it yet. You don't get how the brain and the mind really work. And so for me, there have been 1,000 shifts. Byron Katie's 9 days school. But if you can't afford that, read her books. She has videos. She gives it all away. There's nothing in her school. You know, I have coaches say, yeah, but I can't afford to go to her school. Okay. She's got 100 videos where she coaches people. Everything in the school is in those. They're in her books, her audiobooks too. And I used to immerse myself in things like that. And every time I did the elevator up the soul line goes up another floor. And pretty soon, this basement is just filled with light. And anyone can do that. You don't have to have an enlightenment experience or anything like that. Anyone that's open to anybody uh, can rise on the soul line once they know it's there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And somebody's asking in the chat, how do you spell her name? If you're asking about Byron Katie, that's Byron and then Katie, Katie. And then for the individuals at the University of Santa Monica, could you share the book name again, Steve?
Remembering the light within.
And who were the authors, if you remember?
Yes, doctors Ron and Mary Hulnick, Hulnick.
Great, thanks. Um, just so thanks so much for sharing. You know that journey, that spiritual journey that you've been on, and some of the things just to be present to. You know, as for all of us when we're on this journey ourselves. I've got a question that I've been more curious about as of late, and I don't know all the details, so feel free to share what you want to share. But it sounded like there was a time in your life where you were a single parent.
Oh
Would I
yeah,
be correct in saying that?
yes, I had full custody of 4 children. So yes, I was a single parent with full custody. Their mother had a brain disorder and was institutionalized for a while, but never came back to the family system. And so here I am with 4 kids. I'm trying to run a business, and I've got 4 children, and there's a really good reason why I don't give courses on parenting. Uh, my parenting was wild and chaotic and full of mistakes, but we made it through.
Sounds like my parenting. um, and so I've I'm got a wife. I've got two young boys, and there are many times where I'm like, gosh, this is a challenging journey. And then, when I reflect on a situation like you were in, um, where you had sole custody of 4 kids, you were working, like what, I guess even finding the question there, how did you create such an experience that allowed you to, you know, show up as a parent and provide and really, again, if we look at what you've created, like create this meaningful life, like how, like what led to the creation of that for you? moving through that time of life?
Well, I didn't have a choice. It felt like, I could have sold them or something, but I didn't want to do that. I just did the best I could. And I got help. I got a lot of advice from other parents, and I had a therapist who helped me with my children, gave me ideas and ways to relate and connect to them. And the kids helped a lot. I mean, they could see this guy needs help. Uh, he's not that good a parent. And so I would come home from work, and my little daughter would be standing on a chair stirring. Dad, dinner's going to be ready. She's stirring some stew she had made. And so we all pitched in. They knew that I wasn't that good. And we all pitched in. They had compassion for me and my situation. So we all pitched in and worked together. We worked as a collaborative team to get them dressed and off to school and have life work for everybody. And it worked. I mean, it was, when I look back, the funny thing is, you said parenting is challenging. It sure is. However, when I look back on those days, even when my kids are all adults now and they have their kids, when we talk about those days, those are the happiest moments. I don't think of the business successes I had, and I remember little moments with each of those kids and all of those kids. It's the most rewarding activity in the world, even though it feels like in the moment it can feel like the biggest challenge.
Yeah, thanks for just sharing your perspective. I mean, it's real. I think that that's the thing that really just stands out, is that, it's a real experience. And I can tell you that, there are many dads, families, that um that really just want the best, for their kids and for themselves. And there's just such humbleness in the share. And I love that you spoke to, reflecting back, like those were some of the best moments, because it's easy to forget that. It's easy, even in where I'm at in life, it's easy to want to create the success and create the achievement, and knowing that, like, yeah, this is the moment, this moment now with my 6-year-old, my 4-year-old, we're not going to get those moments again. So thanks,
Yeah.
just for presencing back to that. Well, thanks so much for just sharing your wisdom, and just being in conversation today. Is there anything else that you would like to, just share with the audience, whether they're watching live or on the replay, about your work or the legacy that you've created, just anything that's present for you?
Um, yes, I think what I'd like to share, especially if there are coaches watching, it don't be intimidated by this profession. Don't get confused. Sometimes this profession gets contaminated with self-help evangelism, and we go to a rally with a motivator up on the stage yelling, and we get all pumped up, and we think that somehow coaching takes this huge leap of courage and this huge leap of, but it's a profession like any other, and you can learn it like any other. If you stay in a learning mindset, you can succeed at this profession. It's a trending profession. Coaching is growing. More and more people are hiring coaches than ever before. And it's, if you somebody says I've decided to become an accountant, people don't say, "Oh my gosh, oh wow, what a courageous venture you're into," or "I've decided to become this or that," or "I'm going to be an engineer." People say, "I'm going to be a coach," and people say, "Oh wow." Uh, the thing is, coaching's like those professions. It is learnable. People can teach it to you one day at a time. Show up for work, have conversations, learn how to help people, and it's doable. So what I try to help when I do help coaches, I try to say, take your mind out of that big self-help, huge achievement mindset. You're not doing the impossible by having a prosperous practice. You're doing the doable, and allow yourself to create your practice by doing the doable all day, not thinking of how given my cowardly nature, how can I possibly be a successful coach? No, do the doable, stay inside your comfort zone, keep gathering skills, and you will succeed.
Hmm. Yeah, it definitely reminds me of like the blue collar work and
Yeah,
coaching, you
yeah,
know? Yeah, and just the so true, really that this profession, it can be learned.
yeah,
It can be and learned and learned through experience. And huge part of just being in conversation with people. I think that there's a great line that you speak to that you're not a coach unless you're coaching, and so find people to coach,
yeah.
find people to be in conversation with. And yeah, it's such a great message. Um, and I know we talked about this, in before we started recording, but is there any place that folks could find out more information about you? A website or just a resource that you'd want to share?
Yeah, stevechandler.com is the website, and it's got the latest books and audios and things like that. Anything I'm doing is on there. So you can go there and check out what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for the folks that are listening or catching on the replay, if you ever have questions about resources, feel free to ask. I've got a chance to listen to quite a few of them and read some of Steve's books, and so many great resources. I cannot recommend them enough. So please feel free to reach out. Steve, thank you for your time, today. And I always like to end these conversations by giving some acknowledgement. Would you be open to receiving some acknowledgement from me?
Sure.
Awesome. Steve, I really want to acknowledge you for just the gift that you are to the world. Truly, as I mentioned before, there's so much that you've provided, for coaches to flourish and succeed. And it feels to me like that's just a part of the creation that you've brought to the world. These other elements of, creating a meaningful life and really being intentional and authentic about who we are and how we are serving others and connecting with others. It's such a like it's truly a gift that you've given to all of us, who get to cross paths with you. um, I really want to acknowledge you for just like the worldliness, the adventure that you bring into the space. um, again, I've had such a great opportunity to just be immersed in your work. And it's always a surprise, even after listening to stuff that you've recorded. Maybe I've listened to it two, three, four times. There's always something new, and it really speaks to like the breadth of life that you've created. And it's so wonderful to be a part of. So thank you truly for the gifts that you've brought to the world, the people that you've helped bring up in this coaching industry as well, but really just for who you are. It's such a gift to all of us, and I just can't thank you enough for all that you've done for us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hmm.
Thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. All right, guys. Well, that's it for today. Again, if you have any questions that you potentially didn't get to ask in our live session, please feel free to put them in the comments, or even send me a message. And if there's anything specific, I'll send Steve an email and and get his perspective on it as well. So thanks again for watching. I know there was a great audience that was here with us. And again, Steve, thank you for your time today. It was such an amazing conversation with you. All right, thanks everybody. Bye for now.